welcome to another Long Walker Live, where we cover everything to do with the fall of the West. So, remember to like, subscribe, and hit that smash button to get more information on any of this.
Hit the smash button?
Yep. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this one. We got this tip-off from Chatty Charlie about covering the WPATH files. And we found a couple of things, not very much, but these are longer things, so we'll see what we got and what we can debunk and what we can go over on this one. So let's get into it.
Pause it over there.
Alright.
Leaked files from the World Professional Association of Transgender Health are showing widespread medical malpractice on children and adults who seek care through the organization. The group Environmental Progress has published the raw files in a shocking new report. Environmental Progress founder Michael Schellenberger wrote, "The WPATH files show that what is called gender medicine is neither science nor medicine. The experiments are not randomized, double-blind, or controlled. It's not medicine, since the first rule is to do no harm, and that requires informed consent." Joining us now to discuss is journalist and founder of Environmental Progress, Michael Schoenberger.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's one thing that gets me the most with any of this, is that doctors take an oath to do no harm. And so many times that's not the case, especially here. I mean, you're mutilating kids for the sake of money. I mean, these doctors should be immediately stripped of their doctor title and have to re-go back to school if they even want to come close to practicing ever again, to truly understand what being a doctor is.
Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this seems to be a very interesting, somewhat groundbreaking piece of evidence. I think my first question to you would be around how do we juxtapose this with what the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, has to say about the vital importance of gender medicine, noting that it improves mental health care, it improves health and well-being, particularly of transgender young people, those who are non-binary, and others who are at higher risk for things like suicide and hate crimes.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a great question. I mean, and that's one of the questions that people are going to have to answer over the next coming years or decades. This is something that's been endorsed by most major medical organizations. But when you lift the hood and you look underneath what's going on, what you find is that these organizations are relying on this organization called the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. And when we look at those files, which includes both these written files but also videos, you see that the doctors, surgeons, therapists, and others that are involved, they admit that the parents and the kids do not understand that they are facing lifelong sterility as well as potentially a significant loss of sexual function. They don't understand these treatments, and that's called informed consent, which is right up there with do no harm. And so I think this is a really, a violation of medical ethics. They're also claiming that there's this evidence, but in fact, it's not scientific evidence. It's not evidence that's based on, properly studies over time. The most shocking thing, one of the most shocking things, there's a lot of shocking things in there, is the ways in which they don't actually follow up with their patients. In other words, you'll see surgeons say, well, as far as we know, these things have gone well, or we don't know after 6 months. So you don't have a proper long-term study. And we do now know there's been several studies now debunking this claim, this false claim that somehow suicide risk is higher if you don't do these radical interventions. It appears as though quite the opposite is the case, and that there's a huge amount of regret. And much of what we see in the WPATH files are doctors and therapists dealing with detransitioners, dealing with people experiencing serious regret about the loss of their ability to have children or about their ability to achieve sexual function in the ways that most people are able to.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that point about whether or not these so-called treatment plans actually help mental health. We saw that the National Health Service in England just banned puberty blockers for minors experiencing gender dysphoria outside of clinical research settings. We also saw a study that...
Yes, I am not at all for the blockers, the puberty blockers at all. People don't really understand. It's like stopping a kid's growth as far as any hormone goes. I don't care if they say it's not damaging, but it is.
It's damaging.
No matter what, it is damaging.
Even my mother, who is a biological female, she started to begin to have her period at the age of like 9 or 10, and so they put her on puberty blockers for 2 to 3 years to try and to stop that. Well, I don't think that it stopped it. I think she still ended up having her periods, and in addition to that, she ended up excreting like black sweat. Like she had to wear like pads underneath her arms because she had black sweat. She had extraordinarily swollen glands and stuff, so they just stopped with it, you know.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't even know if she even made it to 12 with it, but like she had it for like a year at least, and you know, she's a biological female.
Exactly. So imagine
there was a medical need for it, and there was problems, and you know, that could be a contributing factor to the way she is.
Of course it could. Yeah.
You know, her bones are kind of brittle. She's a very small framed person, and she has a lot of mental issues. So, you know.
Very much. I mean, you hear that. I mean, that's just one case. There's hundreds out there.
When you're done with this one, I will share with you the Hippocratic Oath that I found.
Okay.
Male to female transitioners have much higher suicide rates after going through a bottom surgery, as it's called. So, I mean, why is the United States so much further behind Europe in terms of putting a pause on treatments, especially for children? And how is it that we got to this point where so much of what we believe is the data or science on the gender affirming care model has turned out not to be true?
Well, yeah, and I think you're pointing to something really interesting, which is that the conversation is in a completely different place in Europe. The progressive side of things, the liberal side of things, is raising really serious concerns about this. In Britain, the National Health Service basically banned puberty blockers in all of the government, in the NHS hospitals. The Times of London, which is the New York Times of Britain, came out for a full ban on puberty blockers on children. They called it quack medicine. Which is very similar to my reaction when you read this. It feels like witchcraft when they're just basically imagining that they're going to rearrange people's bodies to align with some sort of gendered soul or some sort of gendered essence. There's no science for that. It's really much more akin to quack medicine or pseudoscience or witchcraft than anything approaching science-based medicine. So, yeah, I think that one of the issues, the United States is we have a hyper-capitalist healthcare system. In Europe, they tend to be centralized, socialized systems where the government has a lot larger role. And so when the government makes a particular decision, as in Britain, that's basically the decision for the whole country. Whereas in the United States, obviously there's 50 states, different states are pursuing different things. And we've seen the medical associations in the United States really get bullied by trans activists into adopting these entirely unproven pseudoscientific methods, rather than taking a minute and considering, hey, maybe messing with the puberty of teenagers is not the best way to go.
Yeah.
Why do you think that the messaging as you've presented has not caught fire as strongly as I think that you're delivering it here? The Washington Post released a report just a little while ago, earlier this week, about LGBT hate crimes in public schools, and found that states with laws targeting LGBT issues were also correlated with the states in which we saw the largest amounts of suicide awareness and rises in mental health crises for LGBT students. If the answer is not puberty blockers or some of these other things that students or their families are seeking, what would it be? And in what ways can we help these students who are having gender dysmorphia, gender crises, however you describe it? In what ways can we help these young people who are seeking some forms of healthcare that, quite frankly, at this point, we've seen a rise that our nation hasn't necessarily had to deal with before?
Sure. Well, so first of all, there's a lot of different therapeutic approaches, and I'm certainly not a therapist, but I've interviewed many therapists about this. Obviously, one of the most proven forms of therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy, which actually consists of talking back to depressing thoughts, including this idea that you're not born in the right body. And so that's really the opposite of what's called gender affirming care, which is affirming the idea that somehow you were born into the wrong body. So there's other forms of therapy. There's other forms of psychiatric disorders. A lot of these are anxiety disorders. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of adolescents, particularly adolescent girls, suffered from anorexia, eating disorders. We see other body disorders, basically psychiatric disorders related to discomfort in the body. We know that there's a lot of discomfort as girls go through puberty. They become the objects of sexual attention from men, and that's very disconcerting, and they often want that to go away. We also see a lot of people on the autism spectrum being misdiagnosed with gender dysphoria. And then finally in the files, we see people with schizophrenia and people with what used to be called multiple personality disorder being diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
Yeah, see, that is what the biggest thing that I have noticed is now instead of calling it multiple personality disorder, it's gender dysphoria. That is what they seem to have switched on.
I just found their website, their actual website, and they have a book on here that you can read called The Standards of Care for the Health of Transgender and Gender Diverse People. And the very second chapter is called Global Acceptability, and it sounds like a whole bunch of propaganda for like how to encounter people and kind of like change their mind about how trans is. And there is a section in here about children and adolescents and the process that they need to go through to become trans. So I haven't gotten to that part yet, but it's like this is like from a medical perspective. And WPATH apparently has something called US PATH, because WPATH stands for World. And then there's US PATH, there's Asia PATH, and there's like another one. So there's like a couple other subsets of this.
So we'll check all those out too later.
Yeah. And of course it was
Hey!
from the Diagnostic Manual of the World Health Organization. So, come on guys, why is everyone crazy right now? Solar flares.
Animals.
Yes, it was the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. That's what WPATH stands for.
Okay.
So go ahead and finish that. I'm actually able to
Yep.
do it again.
And being prescribed these very radical interventions, both the drugs and the drugs and the surgeries. So I do think that we need to take a pause. There's a major book by a former BBC reporter called Time to Think. I think there's been a sense in which we really need to put a pause on this and just take a minute. It does appear that most people's gender dysphoria goes away when they go through puberty.
Yep.
And they start to become an adult. And so I think one question is, why are we doing these experiments on people under the age of 18 and people that are clearly suffering from other psychiatric disorders or serious mental illness, when really we should be addressing those things first?
See, and that's exactly what it is, ladies and gentlemen, is experimenting. They want to see what they can do, what might work. They don't know, so they're using these people as guinea pigs. Flat out is what they're doing.
It says right here, Statement 2.1, we recommend healthcare systems should provide medically necessary, gender-affirming healthcare for transgender and gender-diverse people. So they want to extend it to all clinics and all hospitals, and to every, that's their goal.
Yeah.
It's a specialty. When you have to go for anything else,
Yeah.
it's a specialty. When I
You
had
have
my
to-
surgeries, I had to go to LA.
You have to go somewhere else, yeah.
I mean.
You have to get a referral.
It says, consequently, WPATH urges healthcare systems to provide these medically necessary treatments and eliminate any exclusions from the policy documents and medical guidelines that preclude coverage for any medically necessary procedures or treatments for the health and well-being of transgender or gender diverse individuals.
Okay, this one's got like a couple minutes left.
First, in allowing nature to take its course and people to go through puberty. I personally, the father of two children, I think puberty should be viewed as a human right. I don't think it's right to be depriving kids the right to go through puberty.
It's an interesting point about the underlying mental health conditions that occur for people who later go on to develop gender dysphoria, because obviously those don't just go away if you go through a so-called gender-affirming surgery or treatment. And I also wanted to ask you about one of the shocking things I saw in the WPATH files, which was sort of the almost cavalier attitude and even the surprise in some cases at these medical providers discovering that things like puberty blockers blockers, hormones, and gender-affirming surgeries, as they call them, came with these really significant side effects. It seemed like they had never really considered that they might have actually been permanently altering the bodies of their subjects, even as publicly we are told that these things are entirely reversible.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a couple of things there to unpack. I mean, the first is that it tends to be the case that when kids go on puberty blockers, that the vast majority of them then progress to cross-sex hormones, meaning males taking estrogen and females taking testosterone, and then proceeding on to the surgery. So it feels like it's like kind of a track that you get on. I think the other thing I would say about the video, people can see the video. We gave away the entire video, and you can see them sort of saying, yeah, well, what are we going to do? These 14-year-olds don't seem to understand the implications of these radical interventions on their ability to have kids in the future or their sexual function. And they were like, we don't know how to handle that. Well, I think the way you handle is not to do.
Yeah, as he's about to say, I mean, the thing to do, if they cannot handle it, the thing to do is not do it. Do not do the work. Let them grow older. I mean, Nefer over here and I were talking about it a while ago, and it was, be about 20 years old at least. 25 years old. And then if you still want to do the surgery, by all means do it. But allow your body, your brain, everything to grow and be before you go and alter and change things.
Like many of these transgenders now, they're not even going through social transitioning.
No.
And it's like I can see socially transitioning when maybe they start to come into puberty or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, let's see how bad you want it, and then spend at least, a year checking that out, and then move it on.
Yeah.
And then
but that's the problem. They want the easy way.
Of course.
They want the way that's going to give them the instant results.
Instant gratification. And I'm reading this, and I wish I would have found it earlier because I don't know why I didn't think just to go to their website, but of course they're not going to have this information. But I mean, this is pretty telling as it is. They were talking about some school-based studies that they did between the ages of like 9th graders to 12th graders, and they found like 6,000 in California and Florida. I'm like, why did you choose California and Florida though? Like where they're allowed, like they're sanctuary states and stuff, and it's like, I don't know about Florida, but California. So it's like they flooded them in here, and then so they can like have a, bigger case study.
Yeah, exactly they did.
It's like they choose California because there's a bunch of them out here. Yeah, just go ahead into the end of this one, and I will.
Intervention. It was strange to watch these people acting like this was some great puzzle or mystery, as opposed to saying, "Wait, maybe we should stop doing this." Like maybe this is why I think a lot of people look at this and we just kind of go, "These doctors, it is a kind of quack doctors. They're really so out of touch that they are sitting here talking about these problems, but it never occurs to them that maybe they shouldn't be doing those radical interventions in the first place."
Michael, we'll have to have you back because there's a lot more to unpack here. We just don't have the time. Thanks for joining us, and more rising after this.
This is obviously an extremely serious accusation that we're making in this report.
So I couldn't really, there's a new oath. It's like, it doesn't really remember, I don't remember it being this way, but this is what it says. This is the one that they're using now.
Okay.
This is the one that's being the most commonly used one out of medical school. And it says, I swear to fulfill, this is the Hippocratic Oath.
Okay.
Hippocratic Oath. I swear to fulfill to the best of my ability and judgment this covenant. I will respect the hard-won scientific gains of those physicians in whose step I walk and gladly share knowledge as is mine with those who are to follow. I think what's missing is the prayer. There used to be a prayer.
Okay.
And at first in Greek it was to 3 or 4 separate gods of healing and like hygiene. And now, then they turned it, of course, to the Christian God. But now it's gone completely because, they've put hard-won scientific gains before all else.
Well, you just wait. It's going to become woke and everything else very soon.
Pretty close. I will apply for the benefit of the sick all measures that are required, avoiding those twin traps of over-treatment and therapeutic nihilism, which is literally what they're doing, therapeutic nihilism.
Yeah.
Like letting them, just go into this dangerous trap. I will remember that there is art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife or the chemist's drug. Sure. I will,
Wow.
I will not be ashamed to say, I know not, nor will I fail to call in my colleagues when the skills of another are needed for a patient's recovery. So they're saying, to be humble and to say, if you don't know, then you shouldn't say that you know.
Yeah.
I don't know any doctors that act like that.
No.
They all think that they're the final word on any
They
kind
think
of
that they're
medicine.
God.
Yeah, make sure you stay in your bubble.
I am.
Yeah, they do. I will respect the privacy of my patients, for the problems are not disclosed to me that the world may know. Most especially must I tread with care in matters of life and death. It is given to me to save a life, all thanks, but it also may be within my power to take a life. This awesome responsibility must be faced with great humbleness and awareness of my own frailty. Above all, I must not play at God. See, the first do no harm thing isn't here anymore.
No, it's not.
I will remember that I do not treat a fever chart, a cancerous growth, but a sick human being whose illness may affect the person's family and economic stability. My responsibility includes those related problems, if I am to cure adequately for the sick. I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure. Agreed. I will remember that I remain a member of society with special obligations to all my fellow human beings, those sound in mind and body as well as the infirm. If I do not violate this oath, may I enjoy life and art respected while I live and remember with affection thereafter. I mean, they're asking for accolades, like in their oath.
Yeah.
May I be remembered as long as I do what I'm supposed to do. So it's not a service, man. That's
idolatry.
Yeah. May I always act so as to preserve the finest traditions of my calling, and may long experience the joy of healing those who seek my help. So, see,
It's changed.
It's changed.
It's majorly changed since what we knew.
I mean, even my mother's for the CNA class was much more. It was much deeper than that.
Yeah. Now it's just broader because
Inclusive is what they've made it.
Because it's not fair to certain people to leave it just this way.
And it's like, I'm looking now for this chapter about gender diverse children. This is within their standards
Yeah.
of healthcare for the transgender and gender diverse people, right from the WPATH site. This is the advice that they give to their medical professionals to treat people.
Okay.
Just make sure you stay in here.
Oh, I am.
But Wolf, I need to show you something though.
No, I'm pulling the bubble still.
We recommend HCP's work with parents, schools, and other organization groups to promote acceptance and affirmation of transgender identities and expressions, whether social or medical interventions are implemented or is not. Acceptance and affirmations are associated with fewer negative mental health and behavioral symptoms, so coddle them.
Yeah.
Change society, because they may be a little bit more suicidal than the average person.
Yeah.
You don't freaking know that, dude. The other day, I showed you that video of the girl. It was 3 weeks before my attempt.
I know, yes.
5 hours before my attempt.
Yeah, and she was happy as can be.
And then I read the comments, and there were so many 10-year-olds that had attempts already, and they have suicidal ideations every day. 10, 12. I think the oldest one I saw was 13. I mean, I saw some that had gone through it and made it out, and older, and giving advice to those kids, but there were so many.
Oh, I just was talking with Trevor about this today too, and the problem is the what do you call it? What I didn't have also.
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem is not built in people anymore.
Mm-mm.
It's not put there. It's not there. They're so low. I mean, with the school shootings.
Yeah.
They're going because they don't have that, but at the same time, I didn't have the self-esteem,
Right.
but I didn't go shoot up a school.
No, I mean, but I felt a darkness in you, and I was really worried that you might be capable of some seriously dark things, and
But I wasn't around guns either.
Right, responding to that sort of trauma and stuff.
Interesting.
Let me get down to this. I guess you can start the next one. It's a 2-hour thing.
So we're only gonna do half an hour of it or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's an actual interview with the whistleblower or whatever it is. I'll get you some of it.
So let's get on with it.
Pseudoscientific surgical and hormonal experiments on children, adolescents, and vulnerable adults. we're looking at a case of very serious medical mistreatment where children and vulnerable adults are being given drugs and given surgeries without them understanding the implications of those drugs and surgeries. And what's more, the files themselves, and I think if there's one thing you want to take away from this, what it shows is that the professionals involved in so-called gender medicine recognize that both the children and the parents, as well as the people with mental illness that they're so-called treating, they know that they don't understand what they're getting into. What we're dealing with here is, in my view, one of the worst medical mistreatment scandals in human history, and maybe the worst.
Thank you for watching The Winston Marshall Show. Hello and welcome to The Winston Marshall Show with me, Winston Marshall. I have the great privilege of speaking to a lot of interesting people and I'm very inclined often to say that they're my favorite guests. I'm also a believer that actions speak louder than words. Today, I am joined by someone that has spoken with me not once, not twice. So this is his third appearance. The third time I've got to interview him.
All right, so this is the section from the WPATH thing still. This is what I'm still reading.
Yeah.
There's 8 standards of care, and we're at statement 6-7 regarding youth, not adolescents.
Okay.
Youth. So I would imagine probably, 15 and under, right?
Yeah, that's what I imagine.
We recommend providers consider prescribing menstrual suppression agents for adolescents experiencing gender incongruence. And incongruence doesn't mean dysphoria. Incongruence means you just don't jive well with that gender. For instance, when I was much younger, I didn't as well. I was much more comfortable dressing like a boy, doing boy things. I did not like the male attention. You know, it was like, and there was a lot of familial reasons for that. But, you know, it was like, that's what incongruence is.
Okay.
It's just like, because congruence means to match. And so if you just don't feel like you match, I didn't feel like the other girls. I never felt like the other girls.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's
I still do.
the tomboys, you know?
Yeah, I guess
mean,
that's just...
they're all over the place.
So they're saying if they're experiencing that, to go ahead consider prescribing menstrual suppression agents who may not desire testosterone therapy. So first, offer them testosterone. And if they don't want the testosterone, then offer to have menstrual suppressing things at least.
Wow.
Or in conjunction with the testosterone therapy for breakthrough bleeding. When discussing the available options of menstrual suppressing medications to gender diverse youth, providers should engage in shared decision making, use gender inclusive language. Example, asking patients which terms they'd like to utilize, refer to their menses, reproductive organs, and genitalia, instead of just keeping it science based.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, so what do you want to call it? I think I will just call it my coochie, you know? And it's like, so that's okay. That's not, that was never acceptable before. You know.
I know.
And perform medical exams in a sensitive, gender affirmative manner. So if you have a girl that's like seriously uncomfortable with having an exam down there and she has some sort of pelvic inflammatory disease, they're just gonna be like, it's okay because you're a dude.
Yeah. Oh
and the pelvic inflammatory disease.
And so then let's hope that.
Cancer
yeah, I was gonna say let's hope that it doesn't turn to something serious.
Yeah. So it's like just So if it makes them feel uncomfortable,
then don't do it.
Don't do it. And it's like. I mean that you know that goes true for all medical fields. If you're seriously like uncomfortable, then you can walk away at any point, you know. But when there's like medical checks and necessary reasons to be there, I mean, I think that's only a standard. I mean, it's not comfortable for anybody.
No, it's not.
Going in for the wanded ultrasounds where they're like super invasive and sticking stuff up you to like look at the inside of your body. It's not comfortable for anybody, but it has to be done sometimes. But apparently not. I'm just kind of scanning here just to see what some patients may offer. See, like, another thing that they're doing is just kind of like customizing their trans experience. It's like, oh, perhaps you just want to look non-binary. So if you're a girl, we'll administer some testosterone and that'll lower your voice and it'll sharpen your features and it'll make you more androgynous. You know, so they're just like, it's fashionable.
I saw from Matt Walsh a little while ago, and it was him reading a book or whatever, and it was saying that binary is now a gender.
Non-binary?
Non-binary is now a gender.
This like totally voids the whole point, isn't it?
I know.
Oh my god. All right, go ahead.
Is Michael Schellenberger. Michael, great to see you again.
Pleasure to be with you, Winston.
So the first time we spoke, it was in 2022 about your global worldwide best-selling book, Apocalypse Never, as well as your also global worldwide best-selling book, San Francisco. We were in San Francisco, and we were in San Francisco. Then we spoke last year in London for the Marshall Matters, and it was the topic of the censorship industrial complex. You were here doing an event with Russell Brand and Matt Taibbi about that and your work on the Twitter files and all your journalistic work. Today you are back. Since then, Public, which you founded and are editor of, has gone from strength to strength. It's now just every day I see you breaking some huge story. We are going to talk about one of those stories today. That is the WPATH Files. So I'm going to call this the trans medical industrial complex, but that's perhaps not accurate. If you'll let me know if anything you agree or disagree with. But for people where the acronym WPATH, and when I say the trans medical industrial complex, it's all gobbledygook. Perhaps we can start with just explaining some basic things. What is WPATH?
Great to talk about this with you. This is a really sensitive subject, and I admit to being a little nervous about it and about the whole topic of trans and gender, something I had not worked on really ever until last year. And what's occurred is that since we did the Twitter files, we've had a number of people come to us as whistleblowers with pretty big stories. And somebody came to us last year, somebody or some people, source or sources came and they brought a set of files from an organization that I had never heard of. It's called the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, otherwise known as WPATH. And it's an obscure organization, most people have never heard of it, but it's had a huge influence. And so the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychiatric Association, all are heavily influenced by this organization, as are organizations in Europe and Britain, where it's had a big impact. And this is an organization that argues that children, including at very young ages, as young as 10 years old, should be affirmed in their gender dysphoria and prescribed puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and have surgeries. And the files that came to us were both text, mostly text, but also video. And they show conversations among surgeons, nurses, therapists, and activists over how to deal with many of the problems that have emerged in so-called gender medicine. And this was a huge story. This was meant, at first we treated it like as journalists would, and we tried to do it as sort of three separate stories because there were so many, literally hundreds of comments and conversations in this sort of a chat room. But we couldn't, it was just kind of too big for us to deal with. And so we ended up moving it to my nonprofit, where I'm president, which is called Environmental Progress. And it's a little strange because it's an environmental think tank, but nonetheless, we realized we needed to spend several months going through the files and really understanding what was going on and preparing a report that is now going to accompanies the files.
Don't know. I think it's important, worth noting that the reason why it's called Environmental Progressives is because your background is that you were environmentalist, and so that's your background, and that non-profit or not-for-profit has developed and is maybe outgrowing its original purposes. So
yeah, that's true. And it's funny. 20 years ago, we wrote a famous essay called "The Death of Environmentalism," which argued that we should broaden our view of the environment, and we've certainly done that with issues around homelessness and addiction and mental illness. Certainly in the case here, we're actually changing the name this year to Civilization Works to reflect our broader scope of concern, still working on the environment. The report that we've done, it has a subtitle. So the title is the WPATH Files, and the subtitle will tell you a bit about what's in the files. The subtitle is Pseudoscientific Surgical and Hormonal Experiments on Children, Adolescents, and Vulnerable Adults. This is obviously an extremely serious accusation that we're making in this report. We have heard from WPATH. There has been some intimations, one might even say threats of a lawsuit against us for publishing the files.
Always.
We are well within our constitutional rights to publish these files. They were given to us. We did not solicit them. And we believe that making these files available in their entirety as they were given to me is in the public interest. And so we are releasing these files as well as this introductory report. It's a over 70 page report that goes through, explains what the files are, what's being said in the files, and also puts them into context with some references to peer-reviewed scientific literature and some other information that's come out about what's called gender medicine.
So just for a bit of context, because there's a broader issue of the trans debate. There's still a raging debate. I know in America. I want to get into that and understand this, how broad it's gotten and how deep the trans ideology has penetrated American institutions. But I think also just
bring that down a little bit now because it's bumping up every time we pause it. So the main thing that their main platform for why they do this, why they peddle this stuff to the children, is they say that they're suicidal. You know, that the trans are suicidal. I'm reading here that they're still suicidal afterwards. They still have depression. And
See?
And sometimes it's more in a this. I'm not on that anymore. I'm just like at a psychiatric site, but it might even be more manic. Like, and that's what you kind of see. You kind of see them being ultra happy, and it's like, oh, I have the gender euphoria, right? You know,
Yeah.
you just kind of think of Dylan Mulvaney, just a little bit over the top, and just like,
Yep.
I'm just so happy, you guys. I'm just so happy, and everybody, I'm still so happy, you know. And it's like it feels really fake, and so that to me is like a manic depression.
It is, yes.
It's like, you know, you're not. It's not right. You're just kind of over the top and stuff. So they still have suicidal ideations and depression and stuff afterwards. So it doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it
probably makes it worse.
Yeah, everything is there, and it's like they're getting what they want, but then they think they get more depressed. Like you said, what makes it worse? Because then it's like, well, wait, I got what I want.
Why am I still so?
Why am I not happy?
Exactly. And so, yeah, they marketing it now, like I said, is gender incongruence, whereas gender dysphoria was like an unshakable, unbreakable way, like you just didn't feel right in your body. It made you sick. You had an aversion to your own body because you just didn't feel right with it.
It's true.
That's not the same thing as incongruency, where you just don't feel like you fit in with that gender. So they're like, they just have a very thin blanket term to describe all trans, and they're not really digging deep.
No, they're not really trying to solve the issues.
In the WPATH thing, it said that it's encouraged at all times that you know, you have the consent and the cooperation of the parents, except if it's like a dangerous situation. And I'm like, but you're talking about youth here. You're talking about people that are just getting ready to start their period. So don't you think the parents are gonna notice?
And yeah, the parents should know every step of the way anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, like I said, the whole trans thing came because there was just like an unshakable, undeniable, like disgust within themselves that the only way they could cope with that is to change their outside appearance and live as the opposite gender.
Exactly.
This is not that. This is just people that just might not feel like they fit in.
Well, exactly, and they're trying to find a term for it. They're trying to find a fix.
They find a surgery, a pill, something, and it's like, I think it's mostly just trendy.
Oh, it is. That's for damn sure.
You know, and it's like the main thing that I read multiple times in there was advise the patient of the possibility of becoming sterile.
Yes.
They say it multiple times in their own WPATH handbook of the standards of care, but you'll find that here they're not doing that. They're not disclosing that to people. They don't understand.
No, and I mean, how can they not think that they wouldn't be sterile? Because a male turning female, you're losing those parts.
Right. And all the hormones to make them.
Yes.
And it's the same
So
thing.
even trying to go back, you're not going to have the same anatomy. And I mean, I've seen several of them that say, well, they made it sound like it was reversible, like they could get me back. And they're like, and then they put me back, and they're like, I have nothing. I'm mutilated.
Yeah, these are the same sort of experiments that they used to do, like in Nazi Germany, in the concentration camps, and now people are just lining up to
for
do
it.
it, you know?
Yep.
Go ahead.
A bit more context on the WPATH might be helpful. So when was this organization started?
By the way, the report, so I am the publisher of this report and I write the preface, but the heavy lifting was done by a staff person at Civilization Works Environmental Progress named Mia Hughes.
Really helpful.
So all credit to Mia and also our editor, Alex Gutentag. So this so-called gender medicine goes back almost 100 years. The first, I think it's quite notable, the first, male to female transition was done by a doctor who then went to work for the Nazis in Dachau, performing hypothermia experiments. You fast forward through a bunch of experimentation to the 1950s. There's a famous German endocrinologist named Harry Benjamin who sort of pioneered this gender medicine, and then an organization that was called the Harry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association was started in 1978. That organization rebranded itself WPATH in 2007.
Okay. When it originally started, what were they doing? What was their objective?
Well, the original objective was to better treat people with what was called originally gender identity disorder. It was a psychiatric disorder recognized by the American Psychiatric Association in the DSM, which is the handbook for psychiatrists.
I have the latest copy of the DSM beside us. We'll be going into that.
DSM-5, I assume. Yeah. The trans activists lobbied very hard to change the name of that disorder to gender dysphoria. And in that shift, you can see that it becomes political, it's becoming ideological. The idea is that it's not actually a psychiatric disorder, that really what they're saying in that name change is not that there's a disorder, but just that there's some confusion related by being born into the wrong body. So right away you can see what I think, and I think a lot of other people that work on this think is a fundamentally pseudoscientific idea, which is that there's more than two genders and that you can more than two sexes and that you can change your sex. There's a lot of confusion here too, because it's not clear what people mean by gender. I think it's fundamental biology that there's two sexes. It's a sperm and an egg that combine. That's how you can create human beings. There's two sex hormones, testosterone.
Okay, so this is from the Human Rights Campaign, and it's talking about transgender children and youth, understanding the basics. And it's again a spot on right exactly what he's talking about.
Yes.
It is important to make distinctions between instances where kids are being kids and when they're asserting things about themselves that are critical to their identity and development, as with the case with gender identity and expression. All right, gender basics. Children are not born knowing what it means to be a boy or a girl. They learn it from their parents, older children, and others around them. This learning process begins early. So you can't look down and see if you have twigs and berries or...
Well, exactly.
How they call this
That's what gets me about this whole thing. Is they're acting like, well, we don't know what we are, but we're born a certain way. We are born with certain parts.
Yeah, and
that is what makes the gender.
And the inherent energies usually come with those parts.
Yes.
It's like they're not going to be apparent until, you're much older.
Exactly.
But they're still there. And, I mean, they do know what it means to be a boy or a girl. They do.
Yeah.
Because it's just in your instincts. That's pretty much you'll have, historically and most commonly you'll have girls play with dolls and you have boys build things.
Yes.
They just naturally gravitate to that. It doesn't mean that they see only boys playing with that and they do it and only girls, it doesn't happen. They just naturally gravitate to those
exactly.
things. It's like it's in their mind. You see it in the Minecraft community, what the girls prefer to do compared to what the boys prefer to do.
Yes, you do. And it's like, okay, you get the ones that, you get some girls that like to be in the mud, that like to do stuff, but that doesn't mean that, oh my god, they're trapped in a girl's body and they're supposed to be a man, or,
No.
it just means that they kind of go that way. They just want to be in it.
Yeah, they might have a few masculine qualities and they just need to exercise those qualities.
And sometimes it comes down to, I've seen it where some of the women that are like that are because they grew up with their father more
Right.
And they followed that path because of it.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
they seem to still be more sane than
Exactly.
most, especially children who were raised by single mothers.
Yes.
That's a big difference. So it says here, as soon as a doctor or other healthcare provider declares, based on observing a newborn's external sex organs, it's a boy or it's a girl, the world around a child begins to teach these lessons. It's not true either.
No.
It's like there's plenty of us out here that just really don't make much of a distinction until they're like 9.
Yeah.
Boys' toys, whether it's sorting out blue clothes and pink clothes, never did that. Boys' toys, girls' toys, never did that. Or telling young girls they're pretty and boys that they're strong. It continues into puberty and adulthood as social expectations of masculine and feminine expression and behavior often become more rigid. But gender does not simply exist in those binary terms. Gender is more of a spectrum, and this is emboldened. So know it's important. With all individuals expressing and identifying with varying degrees of both masculinity and femininity. That's the very first part of this. And then it goes on to talking about social science research reflects that gender affirming behavior on the part of the parents and other adults improves mental health and well-being. That's called feeding into a delusion.
That is for sure.
I mean, I used to run around on all fours and pretend that I was a wolf pup, and my mother and my grandmother would entertain that for a little while, and then when it was time to stop, it was time to stop.
It was time to stop, yes.
And I legitimately felt like that should just be the way that it went, and it was like, I learned that there's that more wolfy wild spirit, so that I can, be in tune with that and be a voice for my wild cousins, but, there was nothing to help me with that, I was like, you just had to do what you're supposed to do. We're put into this body for a reason.
Yeah, for reasons. I mean, it could be to help somebody, it could be,
or maybe you're just
to get further advanced in life.
Exactly. I mean, who knows what you did in a past life, but if you did something really bad as a woman, and they were like, okay, well, now you're going to, say, if you're a woman that did something really bad to men, and it's like they're going to put you in a man's body to, teach you a lesson,
Exactly.
It's just one, spiritual, take on it, but, the point is nobody wants to suffer anymore.
No, they don't. They want the easy route. That's it. Alright, I'm gonna do 10 more minutes of this,
okay.
And then we'll call it. I don't want to get dinged on this.
Alrighty.
This will be tagged in the comments, right? The actual thing.
I'll put the link in the description.
Yeah, we'll put this in the description. If you want to watch the full thing, you can go.
It's a 2-hour interview. It's pretty good.
Yeah, 2-hour interview. I don't want to get dinged, so we're gonna just do 10 more minutes of it and then call this one. So let's get on.
Estrogen, and there's not a third sex, and the idea around not being gender conforming, well, what does that even mean? My idea of what it means to be a man is very different from my grandfather's, and very different from what it was 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. So, but the idea is basically that if you as a man or a woman or a girl or a boy have non-stereotypical behaviors, that somehow that means that you might actually be the opposite sex. That's not a scientific view. That's a deeply pseudoscientific view, in my view and the views of many others. Putting all that aside, you might be a very liberal and tolerant person, consider myself that, and have always been very supportive of gay rights, gay, lesbian, bisexual rights, trans rights. I didn't know what that meant, though. I thought trans was just another kind of gay. Essentially, you add T to the LGBT list. But when you get into really what's going on, we're looking at a case of very serious medical mistreatment where children and vulnerable adults are being given drugs and being given surgeries without them understanding the implications of those drugs and surgeries. And what's more, the files themselves, and I think if there's one thing you want to take away from this, what it shows is that the professionals involved in so-called gender medicine recognize that both the children and the parents, as well as the people with mental illness that they're so-called treating, they know that they don't understand what they're getting into. We have one quote should be famous, from one of the surgeons who says that we're trying to help kids to understand what's going to happen to their bodies before they have high school biology. you're having kids making permanent decisions, including sterilization, but also losing the ability to have orgasm. Kids are often making these decisions before they've gone through
That's
puberty.
crap.
That's what the puberty blockers are for.
divine
So anyway, I don't
union,
want to rush ahead, but
What's up?
That's the divine union.
Yes,
That's the way to connect yourself to a higher power
that is.
and understand like
Lotus energy.
yeah, I mean
How could you do that?
and they're trying to stop people from like
Well, because they don't want people ascending and being higher.
yeah. That's why they're also trying to destroy the nuclear family because
Yes.
having a marriage and children is also part of that
It
whole
is.
covenant with a higher being.
That is-
Wow.
yes, that is true.
That's the first I've heard of that. Now I've heard about being sterile.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because it's like genital mutilation. And they do that in other countries
Yes.
too to girls so that they never can achieve that sort of
China.
China. Is China do that?
And they're bringing it back.
Huh.
Like they got rid of it for a while, and now they're bringing it back.
It's like it's just the only point and purpose is because they're trying to stop people from having that,
Yes.
you're right, that ascended thought process. That's crazy, I've never heard of that.
Yes, I know.
what we're dealing with here is, in my view, one of
You
the
had to.
worst medical mistreatment scandals in human history, and maybe the worst. I mean, at the end of the report, we compare it to lobotomies, ovarectomies, where the ovaries are removed. These are past medical scandals. We prohibited lobotomies when people finally understood what was going on. But this, in our view, is a case of serious medical mistreatment, completely separate from how you feel about men that cross-dress or that
that's
want to
not-
present as women or women that want to present as men. I think a lot of us, myself included, are perfectly fine with that. And we're perfectly fine with people defining what it means to be a man or woman in their own way. What we're talking about here is a case of medical mistreatment for children, adults.
Well, I mean, just look at Matt Walsh's "What is a Woman?" Nobody
Exactly.
anymore knows what a woman truly is.
No, it's like a very controversial question now.
Yeah.
It's like, and then they'll get really confused, like, well, I feel like this is a trick question. I feel like you're putting me on the spot, And it's like,
Yeah, you get your typical person, you ask them a question, and they get that, shut up, walk away.
right.
Just, no, I'm not answering you.
And it's like the other one is like, what is a woman? And anything that identifies as a woman, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's just like not true, man. That's probably a good spot. He was claiming to do pretty good close on that one, so
Okay,
wait,
so call it there?
I would think so.
Okay. Alright, so we will call it on that one. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we don't want to get dinged, so we want to make sure everything's good here. If you want to watch that, go ahead, watch that, comment on this, and let me know what you thought. We can get into even deeper if somebody wants to do that. Let's do it. Comment, and we'll work on a bigger file and see what else we can dig.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, namaste. The Strider is out.